What's up, guys? It's Tactical. Today we have my friend Aaron with Ranges, Backstop, and Burn. Go ahead and check out his channel. Today I'm shooting his Nighthawk Custom Predator 2. This thing is pretty sweet. These are going to be my very first shots on it. I haven't shot this yet, but just dry firing it, this thing feels pretty sweet. So we'll get our first shots off, see how it does. Yeah, that thing's sweet. 45 cal, definitely. You guys know I shoot 9mm pretty much all the time. Like in my Prodigy right here, 9mm. But that thing's sweet. Those are my very first shots. I think I shot a total of 16 rounds, 2 mags of 8. And yeah, it's pretty sweet. Might have to pick me up a 45 cal in the near future. Probably distant future, but in the future. What's up, guys? Randy with Ace Tactical. Today I have with me my buddy Aaron from Ranges, Backstops, and Burns. Aaron, thanks for being on the channel.
Thanks.
Today, what we're doing, we shot a little old school versus new school kind of style video where we have double stack 1911, single stack 1911 in 45. The double stack is in 9mm, stuff like that. Just comparing kind of new 2011 to the old 1911, going through some different features, stuff like that. Aaron, you want to talk about the 1911 and 45 caliber? I know you have a lot of experience behind. You have experience behind both of them, but primarily a lot of rounds through 45 cal.
Well, yeah, I mean, there weren't a lot of actually really good 2011s around 20, 30 years ago. First off, I think we should both say we appreciate Southwest Washington's premier shooting range, Safe Fire. That's where we're at today. Really appreciate them giving us range time. As far as the 1911 goes, I mean, I couldn't really do it justice of what the history of it is, but I mean, it started out as a military service pistol and went on to the civilian market. And I think that at some point, if you get interested in shooting handguns, eventually you're going to start to scratch the itch of some sort of a 1911.
Oh, yeah.
And that was exactly what it was for me, was that I had kind of come into like law enforcement and then, obviously carrying concealed off duty, and then just kind of getting into guns a little more. And what's this 1911 thing? Well, eventually you start to see that the 1911 platform was really highly appreciated by people who enjoyed accuracy and ease of use. Once you learn kind of the manual of arms, of the grip safety and the thumb safety and all of that, but it really becomes a pistol that you really kind of explore in your journey. And it was kind of funny that back in sort of the early 2000s or kind of the early 2010s, I was still carrying a 1911 most of the time in law enforcement, and you'd hear people say, hey, your gun belongs in a museum. And then as I'm getting ready to retire, seeing that the staccatos are coming out and that sort of what's old is new again, or sort of in a different reinterpretation of it, I think was really an interesting thing that the 1911 concept still lives on.
All right, guys, now we have Aaron's Baer Concept 6. Baer Concept 6, you can see right here, Baer Customs engraving. Maybe you can't see it, it's pretty faded. This thing has been through a lot with Aaron. Be sure, again, check out his channel, Ranges, Backstops, and Berms. Let's go ahead and get our initial impressions of this. Baer Customs. For me, I think the big reason why I got into 1911s was really, shooting like striker fired guns. I would always try to improve the trigger and get a nicer trigger feeling. And I always heard people say, oh, nothing beats a good 1911 trigger. And then when I finally I think my first 1911 I shot was like a really cheap one. I think it was like a Thesis, and I was like, yeah, this trigger, it's okay. It's still hammer fired, not a bad trigger, but I didn't see the hype behind it.
Right.
And then I think the next thing I shot was a staccato, and I was like, okay, I see what people are saying now about the trigger.
Yeah.
But why do you think 1911s are kind of making their way back around?
Well, clearly the technology has improved quite a bit. As far as back in the day, you could buy a 1911 pistol that would be about the same price as your average Beretta or Sig or Walther or Smith and Wesson, but you pretty much knew you were going to have to send it off and get some work done on it to really kind of make it into something that would be a good shooter and a reliable shooter. Because in a lot of cases you can have reliability or efficiency, but you can't have both. And so wanting to have both is, you know, the ideal, that perfect trigger that is the gun's accurate. And ultimately, I think that we've really kind of leveled up in an era of technology where CNC machining and computer-aided design has made interchangeability of parts so easy that a lot of the parts on the newer like staccatos and the prodigy, Springfield prodigy are not necessarily, you don't have to customize certain parts anymore. It's just you can buy a new part and put it in. So that really has allowed, kind of opened the market for your average pistol shooter to kind of buy in and not necessarily have to immediately go start buying a bunch of extra parts and have them fitted. And to be honest, you know, they're still fairly new and they tend to be a little more expensive than your Sig 320 or your Glock 17, but what you're getting out of it is on a different level, I think.
So one thing I wanted to talk to you about with your 1911, you talk about you know, like accuracy and reliability, stuff like that. How, I know with my Springfield Prodigy, after about 1,000 rounds, it'll start to like gum up the slide. Tolerances are just so tight, which leads to everything that's beautiful about the platform, those tight tolerances. But it also leads to, I do have to clean this gun. Unlike my light Glock, I can run thousands of rounds through it, and as long as it's oiled, she'll just keep going. Versus this, I do have to wipe it down, you know, re-oil it, make sure that it's well lubricated. Is it the same thing?
Oh, it absolutely is. It became really hard, Randy, when the Glocks really came into their own, and then some of the things like the Sig 320 and some of the other polymer guns that I have a lot of experience with those, as well as I know you do too, and most of your audience probably are very familiar with the Glocks. They're so easy to clean that if you're going to stay with the 1911, you're going to be committing to probably 3 times as much time that it takes to clean it once than over just a Glock, which is a very nice and easy field strip. And then having to stay on it and probably clean it more often, you really have to be committed to that. And at some point, you start to ask yourself, is the time cleaning this really worth it when other technology, like a lot of those polymer guns, are getting so easy and so good that, that's probably the reason, I gotta be honest, that's probably the reason why that gun and that platform in the 1911 style for me sits more in the safe now, because if you're gonna be doing a lot of shooting and you really want to be tuned in with the gun that you carry, it takes a lot of time and
thousands of rounds.
Exactly, and then you've got to maintain what you have. You can't just slough off and let it all fall off. And in that case, the 1911 it requires more time, and that's probably one of the parts that I have to say is, if they can invent the 3011 and it doesn't have to be cleaned nearly as much or to the same detailed level, then I would hope that that's the next evolution, while maintaining what is so good about the 1911 and the newer 2011 styles.
Yeah. Do you think, so a pro and con versus whether you're talking about 1911 or 2011 is the weight versus a polymer gun being lightweight? Just having a heavy gun that recoils just so soft. Yeah. Even like when I was shooting yours, the 45 cal, like it obviously has more recoil than this, especially with it being ported, but it's still, bigger calibers, it wasn't jumping out of my hands or anything like that. It's
No,
just-
the 45 from the time that it came out, it was the recoil was described as a gentleman's push because you felt it, but it was not overwhelming.
Very fair. So moving on from the 1911, we'll go to the 2011 double stack 1911, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, chambered in 9mm.
Yes.
This is clear, by the way. Over.
Yes.
Have you shot double stack 1911s, 2011s? Have you shot many of them before today?
Yes.
Okay.
I own several of them before Staccato was Staccato. They were STI,
Yeah.
and I owned several STIs, and I shot them primarily in competition, and I had one built for me, and I carried it on SWAT for about 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh, I did not know that part.
Yeah.
So, give me a quick rundown. Difference between a classic single stack 1911 or double stack 1911. What do you think some big differences are, pros and cons?
Well, that's kind of tough. I mean, there's not a whole lot except the magazine capacity that you could fit in. When I had the gun that I was telling you about, it was actually chambered in 45, so I was able to stuff 15 rounds of 45 into it. And what I really appreciated with both STI and SVI was that while the larger part of the grip down towards the pinky finger and the ring finger, at the middle finger, what they were able to do with the magazines was to kind of funnel them up so that you had a nice tighter grip here around the middle finger. So yeah, as you can see, it kind of funneled up here, and that's pretty much where your middle finger would go as this was in the grip of the frame of the gun. And I think that's what really was the significance. There's a model out right now that actually takes Glock 21 magazines. But if you look at this area right here that I'm referring to, where the middle finger goes, because that doesn't happen in the Glock 21, which is the 45 auto version, it's like still that big fat grip, which is not ideal. And that was always, even after higher capacity magazines and guns came out, the slim grip of the 1911 was always one of those things that most people would say fits their hands better, that, you know, quote unquote. Because in a fight, what would you rather have? The grip of a baseball bat, or would you rather have the grip of a 2x4?
Yeah, the actual baseball bat handle, or the bat head itself.
Yeah. You want, if you're in a fight, you want to fight with something you can really kind of get your hands on and manage. And so that was clearly one of the significance. And I don't think anybody could argue that being able to fit this at the beginning to feed that into the magazine well, even without, this is kind of an old school mag well that it is just kind of a starter kit to what they've become. That makes it so much faster and so much more reliable to hit your reloads than what you would have clearly in a single stack. But other than that, I think that it was, to me, it's the fact that so much of it has remained the same. That I like. What about you?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head as far as obviously you have greater magazine capacity with 9mm being smaller round, that double stack rather than single stack, and then the reloads. That was one big thing that I noticed. Like, if I were to go and shoot your gun, I would have to slow down my reloads a lot, just because you have that skinnier entrance, skinnier magazine, just lining those two holes up. It's going to be a lot harder than with this. It's just, I don't know, way easier. As far as I would agree, the things that changed, that stayed the same, because you have everything that's great about a 1911. Like when I was going over in my head this morning, trying to think of cons for the 2011 platform, and really the only I had two cons, and they kind of go hand in hand, and it's availability of just different manufacturers and models, because you don't have a whole lot of options out there. You have Springfield Prodigy, you have the Staccatos, you have some cheaper options with Rock Island Armory. I think TSUS just made one. Right? Yeah, them and Military Armament Corps, which I think is like a sister branch of TSUS. And then you have your high-end stuff with like Infinity, formerly STI, Staccato, SVI, Nighthawk Customs. You have all that. But even your entry level stuff, like a Springfield Prodigy entry level into the 2011 world, they're still expensive. Like if you're looking at entry level 2011 versus an entry level classic 1911, the price point is huge difference. So that was the big con for me, is just they're expensive and you don't have a whole lot of options out there.
Right.
I do one thing I didn't know, just because I've never really messed around with the 1911 too much until today.
Yeah.
I've shot them like here and there, like I said, but I've never actually went in depth, and like I'm getting a bunch of new knowledge from you today about this platform.
Yeah.
The magazines, I didn't know, because we shot your Nighthawk Custom and your Baer. I didn't know you couldn't interchange those mags, because with this I'm running staccato mag, I'm running Springfield mag, and I'm running Atlas mags.
Yeah, and that's a one of the upgrades or the evolution of the technology. One of the classic things about the 1911, because it was one of the most early semi-auto pistols, was that they tended to be finicky. And what they would be finicky about would be ammunition and the magazines that you could fit on them. Now, to begin with, there weren't a lot of magazines. It was Colt and Springfield, and that was it. And then a lot of different manufacturers started jumping into the game, and they would change some of they would make adjustments on some of the dimensions ever so slightly, and then all of a sudden the magazine from one didn't fit the other. And it's funny how people would, kind of turn their guns into people, and they go, my gun doesn't like that magazine, or my gun doesn't like that. Like, your gun has, likes and dislikes. It's kind of funny. But another kind of failing, if you will, of the classic 1911 was that it has never, here I go being turning into a human being, it's never been a big fan of hollow point bullets. Right, so it was made for ball ammo, and ball ammo can be very effective if it's running hot, which is what you're going to be shooting today when you shot it. That's hot stuff. That's those aren't cream puff loads.
Okay.
I
was gonna say, it still felt pretty. You could definitely feel recoil.
It was pretty stout. Yeah, and that's what it was intended to shoot, and that's what it runs reliably. Otherwise, you're going to start to get hiccups with it. But yes, there tend to be 2 to 3 different.
Is that factory ammo, or was it?
It was, it's factory, and it was
loaded hot.
It's loaded to mimic defensive loads. Okay. So yeah, you're not getting cream puff loads in that batch, but the magazines themselves, there tended to be 2 to 3 different brands that were aftermarket that would work in one and maybe work in another, but it wouldn't work in a different brand. So you pretty much had to find the brand that your gun liked, right? Like it's a human being. So that's just another one of those things that kind of passes in time, is that you don't realize that, no, they don't all work together, and they don't all work and play well together. And that was kind of that concept of the parts gun, that you start throwing parts from different manufacturers. Their dimensions back in the day, before they had much closer tolerances using like CAD machining and that sort of stuff, it wasn't always great. And you could have somebody come and tell you, say, hey man, I got this part for my gun and it runs great, and they put it on their 1911, and immediately they want to take it off. It's like, this thing, my gun doesn't run reliably. So yeah, it was a constant battle, man. And that's what I meant. You had to love them. You had to love them to keep going. Otherwise, you just go back to early on, you go back to a revolver, or you go back to a SIG or a Glock or a Beretta.
Do you have anything else to add before we wrap it up?
Well, clearly, I mean, there's a couple of things that I see on your pistol.
You want to talk about?
No, there's a couple of things on the modern pistol that, again, I could have bought a model that actually had some sort of a weapon mounted light rail. That was never really a fan of a light on my gun, for my own personal reasons and for tactical reasons, so I never had that on there. Another issue that has been resolved is the concept of the red dot sight, which I think is it's even more important for somebody my age, because your eyes start to go, and that red dot is invaluable to be able, but again, it's electronic. And so if the battery runs out or something happens to the window, I've seen those, you've probably seen them too, those windows pop out, and all of a sudden, you better be you better be good with your iron sights, because you're going to have to dance with the girl you brought.
With that being said, though, I will say, just last week, I had an iron sight with my front sight flew off the gun.
Oh,
So I've had irons fail also.
yeah,
I've had my optic fail. I've had irons fail. So
Yeah,
you can't plan, like, no matter how well you plan, things might just happen.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. But those were some of the differences that I noticed, was that you have the weapon mounted light rail or whatever you want to hang off that, and then the red dot sight is and coming that way from the factory, and then having all the options of different types of lights you can put on it. Those are great options. What are your thoughts on some of the pros, cons, differences? Contrast one with the other.
Yeah, like you said, so having the light, the optic, I've seen very modernized, very expensive 1911s. I think Nighthawk did a collaboration with Agency Arms, and they have very nice single stack 1911s out there, and they come pre-cut for an optic with pick rail at the bottom. They're like, I see them on Gunbroker all the time, going for like 5,000-6,000. But they're very nice. So there are, I think, if you want that option, the option's there for you. If you want to stay that classic, 2 World Wars, God's caliber, 45 caliber, classic single stack 1911, but have a more modernized spin where you can have a light and optic. That option's out there for you. One thing I wanted to go over before we do wrap it up is, this isn't a comparison video between 9mm, the caliber itself, versus 45 caliber. However, I would like to get that style video going in the future, just for fun. What do you think? Something like that?
We can talk about it.
In that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, but also, I'm not gonna take on the role of one being the best, because I'd be a hypocrite, because a lot of times I will carry a 9mm. For concealed carry or what have you. So I have a great love for both. And just one comment on what you mentioned about the newer version of the classic 1911. I have seen those before, and I gotta be honest with you, it's kind of struck me that it's almost like you're trying to put a 1,000 horsepower engine into a 1940s roadster.
Yeah.
It's like, it's still just going to have a capacity in 45 of 8 rounds and 1 in the chamber, and you put all of that furniture on it and what it's meant to do. I just kind of go, is that really worth it? I don't know. That's just kind of my thought process. But I'm sure there's some viewers out there that go, yeah, it's worth it. Okay, hey man, to each his own. And
consumer products, it's all relative to how much money the person has. It's all relative.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of stuck in a kind of place and time of, this is what I bet my life on, and I'm thankful that I never. It didn't cost me my life. It ran good, and did everything I asked it to do. But I don't necessarily carry it like I did at one time, and I kind of rely on different tools now. But to see where the technology is going is I just can't believe somebody would spend that much money on a 9mm.
Yeah. There's some. You have Nighthawks, you have Les Baers,
I do.
You have expensive 9mm. Or expensive handguns, I should say.
Yeah.
Not nines, but you have expensive handguns. That did actually strike a question I wanted to ask you real quick, that I remembered. Having experience with both 2011, 1911, in today's age, if you had to just pick one, you knew you were going to war with it, which one are you grabbing and why?
Oh, I would go with the 2011. Like I said, I've owned 2011s before. I only use them in competition, and except for I did have one built for me that I actually carried on a tactical team for about 3 years, and I really loved it. The problem is that there wasn't a lot of service support for it if it broke, or if you needed parts or something wore out, and so that was a little frustrating. But seeing the infrastructure now that you can pick up parts a lot easier, and that obviously Staccato is going for like the law enforcement realm.
Oh, yeah.
They want to be there with the product service, so it's a whole different animal. So knowing that a machine is a series of parts that are intending to try to break, and at some point one of them is going to break and you're going to have to fix it, I would rather go with something that had, you know, the higher capacity and the capabilities of a weapon-mounted light and a red dot sight. But I mean, for home defense or for self-defense, the 1911 you can be a very dangerous individual with one of those for a short period of time.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just carry more magazines on.
That's right.
Have efficient reload. Do you have anything else to add?
I don't know.
No? All right. Thanks for being on the channel, Aaron.
Thanks, guys.
Don't forget, guys, check out Aaron's channel. You want to say it real quick so I don't mess up the verbiage?
Yep. Guys, come on over to Ranges, Backstops, and Berms, and we're going to continue this discussion on old school, new school, 1911, 2011 in a series coming up.
Yeah, we're going to do a series. The next video we do, it's going to be on Aaron's channel, so do be sure to check out his channel. Give him a subscribe. We'll go ahead and link his channel in the description below. It'll be somewhere on screen also. I'm not too sure. The camera guy will figure that out. It'll be on screen somewhere. Again, Aaron, thanks for being on channel.
Of course.
All right,
See you
guys.
soon.
Thanks for checking it out. Don't forget, leave a like and subscribe. Check out Aaron's channel.
See you guys.